Be me, pushing 40, I guess. Senior software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. Been here for the better part of a decade. It's a decent job. The pay is good, the work is challenging enough to not be boring, and the people, for the most part, are competent. I'm what they call a subject matter expert in a couple of our core systems. Basically means I'm the guy they call when something is truly deeply broken. It also means I'm expected to mentor the junior devs. I don't mind it. I actually kind of enjoy it. It's satisfying to see someone who's smart but inexperienced finally have that aha moment when a complex concept clicks into place. We had a good system going. A new junior comes on. They get assigned to a senior dev for a few months. The senior gives them code reviews, answers questions, and holds one-on-one sessions to go over architecture, best practices, that sort of thing. It worked. Our junior devs ramped up faster than at any other company I'd worked for. A few months back, maybe late last year, we hired a new batch of college grads. One of them was Emma. She was assigned to my team, and by extension, to me for mentorship. Kid was sharp, really sharp, picked things up quickly, asked intelligent questions, and wasn't afraid to admit when she didn't know something. The perfect student, really. We'd get together twice a week in one of the small conference rooms. Just me, her, and a big monitor. I'd pull up her code, or my code, or a system diagram. We'd walk through it line by line. I could explain things without being interrupted, and she could ask questions without feeling like she was holding up the whole team. These sessions were incredibly productive. I remember one time she was struggling with a multi-threading issue, a real nasty one that can trip up even experienced devs. She'd been spinning her wheels on it for a day and a half. She brought it to our session, looking completely defeated. We spent an hour whiteboarding the entire process flow. I drew out the threads, the locks, the race conditions, and then I saw it in her eyes. The light bulb went on. She practically ran back to her desk and had the whole thing fixed in 30 minutes. She swung by later and told me she learned more in that 1 hour than in her entire college course on the subject. That's the stuff that makes the mentoring worthwhile. You're building up the next generation of competent engineers. The company gets better, the team gets stronger. Everybody wins. The whole office environment was pretty relaxed, professional, but not stuffy. My best friend at work is Ricky. He's another senior dev, been there about as long as I have. He's more cynical than I am, but he's a damn good engineer. We'd usually grab coffee in the morning and complain about management or marvel at some new, spectacularly bad piece of legacy code we'd discovered. It was a stable, predictable, and productive environment. And then came Elisa. It started with a company-wide email announcing our new Vice President of People and Culture, not HR Director. Oh no, that's old-fashioned. I remember Ricky reading the email over my shoulder. He just made this low groaning sound. He said something like, "People and culture? That sounds expensive and useless." I told him to give her a chance. Maybe she'd be fine. Ricky just shook his head and said, "Guys like us are never fine with the People and Culture department." A week later, she held a mandatory all-hands meeting to introduce herself. She was exactly what you'd picture, probably in her early 30s, dressed in that specific corporate but trying to be hip way. She stood at the front of the room with a bright, fixed smile and spoke entirely in buzzwords. It was a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing. She talked about fostering synergy, leveraging our core competencies, and shifting the paradigm of workplace inclusivity. I looked around the room. All the engineers, men and women, had the same blank, slightly pained expression. It was the face of people who solve concrete problems for a living, being forced to listen to someone who creates abstract ones. She ended her speech by saying she had an open-door policy and was excited to begin the work of cultivating a psychologically safe and dynamically equitable workspace. We all clapped politely and filed out. Ricky caught up with me on the way back to our desks. "Well," he said, "she seems completely disconnected from the reality of what we do here." I had to agree. It felt like someone from a completely different planet had just been made our boss. For the first few weeks, nothing really happened. We'd see her walking around the office smiling at everyone. She'd schedule little meetings with random people to take the temperature of the culture. One of the junior women on another team had a meeting with her and said it was weird. Apparently, Elisa kept asking her if she felt empowered and if the male-dominated energy of the engineering floor was intimidating. The junior dev, who just wanted to code, told her everything was fine and that her mentor was great. She said Elisa looked almost disappointed by that answer. That should have been a red flag. Then, about a month into her tenure, the email landed. The subject line was, "An important update to our collaboration and meeting policy." I opened it with a sense of dread. The email was long and filled with the same corporate jargon from her speech, but the core message was buried in the third paragraph. To proactively ensure a comfortable and safe environment for all team members, and to mitigate any potential for perceived power imbalances or unwelcome interactions, all one-on-one meetings between colleagues of different genders must now be held in an open, public space or with a third colleague present. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. No more one-on-one meetings behind closed doors. My mentoring sessions with Emma were officially banned. I swiveled in my chair to look at Ricky. He was already staring at his screen with a look of pure, unadulterated, "I told you so." He didn't even say anything. He just raised his eyebrows and gave me a slow, deliberate nod. My first thought was that this was insane. It was a solution in search of a problem. We'd never had an HR complaint about this stuff. Not a single one. The system worked. It was efficient. This new policy treated every single man in the company as a potential predator. It treated every woman as a helpless victim who couldn't handle a professional meeting. It was insulting to everyone. I decided I couldn't just let it go. I had to at least try to talk to her. I was a senior employee. I had a good reputation. Maybe she would listen to reason. I walked over to the HR area, which Elisa had rebranded as the Culture Hub. Her door was open. She was sitting at her desk, typing furiously. I knocked gently on the doorframe. She looked up, and her corporate smile snapped into place. "Brian, come on in. What can I do for you?" I stepped into her office. It was sterile, decorated with framed posters of inspirational quotes about teamwork and diversity. I kept it calm and professional. I explained that I'd read the new policy and had some concerns. I described the mentoring program, how it worked, and why the one-on-one sessions in a quiet conference room were essential for effective teaching. I used Emma as a specific example. I explained how our sessions were critical for her development and how this new rule would essentially destroy that. She listened patiently, nodding the whole time. When I was done, she folded her hands on her desk and leaned forward. "Thank you for sharing that, Brian. I really value your perspective as a team leader." My heart lifted for a second. Maybe this was going to work. "However," she continued, "what you're describing is a legacy system, and while it may have worked in the past, we need to build systems that are equitable and safe by design." I must have looked confused because she elaborated. "You might not see the power dynamic in a closed-door meeting with a junior female employee because you're in the position of power, but for her, it can be an inherently intimidating situation. This policy removes that intimidation factor entirely." I tried to argue. I told her that Emma had never expressed any discomfort, that our relationship was purely professional. I said that this policy would actively harm her career growth and the growth of all the other junior women. Elisa's smile tightened just a little. "Sometimes," she said in a condescending tone, "people don't know what's best for them. It's our job to create a structure that protects them, even from situations they don't perceive as dangerous. This isn't about you personally, Brian. It's about creating a better, safer workplace for everyone." The conversation was over. I knew it. It was like talking to a wall that smiled and used words like synergy. I just said, "Okay, I understand," and walked out. I went straight to Ricky's desk. I told him the whole story. He listened, shaking his head slowly. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Welcome to the new world, my friend," he said, "where good intentions and bad ideas have a baby, and we all have to pretend it's not ugly." He then said the words that would define our strategy for the next few months. "It's time for malicious compliance." I asked him what he meant. "She wants this rule? Fine. We will follow this rule to the absolute letter," he explained. "No exceptions, no workarounds. We will do exactly what the policy says, and we will let the consequences speak for themselves. We don't complain, we don't argue, we just comply, perfectly." It felt wrong, but I knew he was right. Arguing was pointless. The only way to show them the rule was stupid was to let it fail. Spectacularly. The next day the change began. I had to have the awkward conversation with Emma. I caught her in the kitchen getting coffee. I told her that, per the new HR policy, we couldn't have our one-on-one meetings in the conference room anymore. She looked confused. At first, I think she thought she had done something wrong. I had to quickly reassure her that it wasn't her. It was a new company-wide rule that applied to everyone. I explained the new options. We could meet with a third person, or we could discuss things at my desk in the middle of the open plan office. She looked crushed. She said, "But I learned so much in those meetings. How am I supposed to ask questions now?" I told her she could always ask at my desk. We both knew it was a terrible substitute. Our section of the office is not quiet. People are constantly talking, phones are ringing, and there are 100 distractions. It's not a place for focused, deep-dive technical discussions. The first time she tried, it was a disaster. She had a question about a complex API integration, the kind of thing that would have been a 20-minute whiteboard session before. She came over to my desk and started to explain the problem. Within 5 minutes, we were interrupted 3 times. First, a project manager came by to ask me about a deadline. Then, Ricky yelled a question at me from across the room about a server issue. Then, the guy at the desk next to mine started a loud phone call. Emma just stood there, looking increasingly frustrated. She couldn't focus. I couldn't focus. She eventually just gave up. "Never mind," she said. "I'll try to figure it out myself." And she walked away. I saw the same story playing out all over the engineering floor. All the senior guys, who were mostly men, had stopped their mentoring sessions with the junior women. We were all following the rule. Maliciously. No one wanted to have a sensitive code review meeting in the middle of the damn office. And finding a third person to just sit there silently while you mentored someone was a logistical nightmare and a waste of a third person's time. So the mentoring just stopped. The junior women, who used to get direct, focused help, were now on their own. You could see them clustering together at their desks, trying to solve problems among themselves. But they were all inexperienced. It was the blind leading the blind. Their productivity plummeted. Tasks that should have taken a day were now taking a week. The number of bugs being introduced into the codebase shot up. Emma, who had been on a rocket ship of progress, was now struggling. She was smart and she worked hard, but she was hitting wall after wall without the senior guidance she'd relied on. It was painful to watch. I wanted to help, but my hands were tied by the policy. The most ironic part? Elisa was walking around the office looking incredibly proud of herself. She saw the lack of closed-door meetings and interpreted it as a grand success. I saw her in the kitchen one afternoon, talking to another manager. I overheard her saying how the cultural energy had improved and how the office felt so much more open and transparent now. She was completely oblivious to the chaos she had caused. She had created her safe space, and in doing so, had made it impossible for anyone to get any real work done. The first real sign of trouble came during a sprint planning meeting. A project that Emma was the lead junior on was way behind schedule. The project manager, who didn't care about the HR politics and only cared about deadlines, was getting frustrated. He asked Emma for a status update, and she admitted that a core component was not working, and she didn't know why. Before the new policy, that was a problem I could have helped her solve in an afternoon. Now, she'd been stuck on it for over a week. My team lead looked at me with a questioning look. I just looked back at him and said, "I'm providing all the support I can within the new company guidelines." I made sure to say it loud enough for the project manager to hear. He looked confused, but the team lead knew exactly what I meant. He just sighed and nodded. The project deadline was missed. It was the first of many. The overall velocity of all the teams with junior women on them started to tank. Meanwhile, the teams that were all male, or had a senior woman mentoring a junior man, were unaffected. Their productivity remained high. The performance gap became glaringly obvious, and the cause was equally obvious to everyone except the one person who had created it. Elisa seemed to live in an alternate reality. At a company town hall meeting, she gave a presentation on her first 90 days. She put up a slide with metrics that she had clearly invented, things like interdepartmental synergy and psychological safety score. She proudly announced that since the implementation of her new meeting policy, there had been a 100% reduction in complaints regarding inappropriate one-on-one meetings. Ricky, who was sitting next to me, muttered under his breath, "You can't have complaints about something that doesn't happen." She was celebrating the absence of a problem we never had. while completely ignoring the massive new problem she had created. The managers and team leads were all squirming in their seats. They knew their projects were on fire, but nobody wanted to be the one to challenge the new VP of culture. So everyone just clapped and pretended her presentation was brilliant. But the cracks were starting to show, and it was only a matter of time before the whole dam broke. The weeks after that disastrous town hall were grim. The atmosphere in the office changed. Before, there was a sense of collaboration, a feeling that we were all on the same team, trying to build something cool. Now, there was a quiet, simmering resentment. You could feel the division. The senior men were walking on eggshells. We were doing our jobs, writing our code, but the extra stuff, the mentoring, the casual advice, the willingness to go the extra mile to help a junior, was gone. Why risk it? We were all officially pre-criminals in the eyes of HR. It was safer to just keep your head down and close your tickets. The junior women were isolated. They were smart, they were capable, but they were being starved of the experience and knowledge they needed to grow. They started to form their own little cliques, trying to solve problems together. But it was a struggle. They didn't have the years of experience to draw on. I saw Emma getting more and more stressed. The spark she had when she first started was gone. Now she just looked tired and perpetually frustrated. She'd spend hours stuck on a problem, chewing on her pen and staring at her screen. I knew I could probably help her solve it in minutes. But the policy was the policy. My compliance was absolute. Ricky was a rock. He saw the same thing I did, and his cynicism was almost comforting. It was a daily reminder that I wasn't the crazy one. One day, Elisa sent out another one of her company-wide emails. This one was about a new voluntary lunchtime initiative, a Women in Tech Lean In circle. The email said it was a safe space for female employees to discuss their challenges and empower each other. Ricky read it and just started laughing, a quiet, bitter laugh. He pointed at Emma's team, where 3 of them were huddled around a monitor, clearly stuck on a major bug that was holding up the whole release. "Look at that," he said. "They don't need a lean-in circle. They need a senior engineer, but the one they were assigned isn't allowed to help them properly." He was right. Elisa was offering them therapy sessions when what they needed was a teacher. She was trying to solve a nail with a screwdriver. The situation came to a head as we approached the end of the quarter. Our company lives and dies by its quarterly product releases. It's the big event that brings in new clients and keeps the investors happy. And the main project for this quarter was in deep, deep trouble. The component that Emma was responsible for was a critical part of the new feature set, and it was a mess. It was buggy, slow, and unreliable. It wasn't her fault. She'd been given a complex task with zero effective senior support. It was like asking a first-year apprentice to build a load-bearing wall without a blueprint or a foreman. The project manager was having a meltdown. His Gantt charts were a sea of red. He started holding daily, emergency stand-up meetings, trying to figure out how to get the project back on track. In one of those meetings, he put Emma on the spot. He asked for a firm deadline for when her component would be stable. She couldn't give him one. She just stood there, looking at the floor, and mumbled something about still working through some issues. The PM, who was at his wit's end, looked directly at me. "Brian, you're the senior on this team. You're her mentor. Why isn't this getting done?" The whole room went quiet. I took a deep breath. I chose my words very carefully. "I am providing Emma with all the support that is permissible under the current corporate policies established by HR. I said it in a flat, neutral tone, just stating a fact. The PM stared at me, then at the team lead, then back at me. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know the details. Elisa's policy wasn't common knowledge outside of the engineering department. After that meeting, Emma caught me on my way to get coffee. She looked like she was about to cry. She told me she felt like she was failing, that she was trying her best, but she was in over her head. She said, "I feel like my career is going to be ruined because of this project. I'm going to get a terrible performance review." Then she asked me, in a very small voice, if we could just have one meeting, in a conference room, like we used to. She promised she wouldn't tell anyone. It was a test. A part of me wanted to say yes, to hell with the rules. But I thought of Ricky, malicious compliance. The only way to fix the system was to let it break completely. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't. I could lose my job. I told her the policy was clear and I had to follow it. She just nodded, her eyes welling up, and walked away. It was one of the hardest things I've had to do in my professional life, to deny help to someone who was asking for it, who I knew I could help. But it had to be done. The release date came and went. The project was not ready. For the first time in 5 years, the company missed a major quarterly release. The fallout was immediate. The stock price dipped. Angry emails from clients started coming in. And the CEO, who was usually a distant figure we only saw at town halls, was suddenly very, very present. He was a man who didn't care about feelings or culture. He cared about one thing: results. And the results were a disaster, an emergency. All managers on deck meeting was called. My team lead told me about it afterwards. Apparently, the CEO went around the room demanding to know what happened. He wanted a single root cause. The project managers pointed to engineering. The engineering managers pointed to a massive, unexplained drop in productivity and a spike in bugs, specifically from teams with junior women. They were trying to be diplomatic. No one wanted to throw HR under the bus. But the CEO was smart. He saw the pattern. He asked, "What changed this quarter that only affected these specific teams?" The room was silent, and then the CEO dropped the bomb. He held up a piece of paper. He said he had received a very interesting letter. A letter signed by Emma and 3 other junior female engineers from different teams. The letter, my team lead told me, was a masterpiece. It was professional, polite, and absolutely devastating. It detailed the new HR policy. It explained how the ban on one-on-one mentoring had completely cut them off from the senior engineers. It stated in no uncertain terms that the policy, which was supposedly created to protect them, was actively and directly harming their professional development and torpedoing their projects. The final line of the letter was the killer. "We never felt unsafe before this policy was implemented. Now, we feel our careers at this company are in jeopardy." The CEO finished reading excerpts from the letter. Then he looked at the VP of engineering and said, "Set up a meeting in my office in 1 hour. I want you, I want Elisa from HR, and I want Brian, the mentor mentioned in this letter." My team lead found me at my desk and told me I'd been summoned. My heart was pounding. This was it, the end game. I walked into the CEO's office. It was the first time I'd ever been in there. It was big, with a huge window overlooking the city. The CEO was sitting at a massive mahogany table. The VP of engineering was there, and so was Elisa. She looked nervous. Her usual bright smile was gone, replaced by a tight, strained line. The CEO didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. He looked at Elisa and said, "I have a report here that says our engineering productivity dropped 20% this quarter, resulting in a failed product launch and millions in lost revenue. And I have a letter here from 4 of your female engineers saying it's because of a policy you implemented." He paused. "Explain?" Elisa launched into her defense. It was a fire hose of corporate jargon. She talked about best practices, about mitigating legal risks, about creating long-term cultural value. She said that a temporary dip in productivity was a small price to pay for building a foundation of psychological safety. The CEO listened to all of it without interrupting. His face was like stone. When she finally ran out of steam, he turned to me. "Brian," he said, "you're a senior engineer. You've been here for years. You're one of the people mentioned in this letter as being a good mentor. Tell me, from your perspective, what happened?" I kept it simple and factual. I described the old mentoring system. I described how effective it was. I described the new policy. I described my conversation with Elisa, where I had warned her this would happen. I described how I and all the other senior engineers had followed her policy to the letter. And I described the predictable, inevitable result. Projects failed. I didn't use any emotional language. I just laid out the cause and effect. The CEO nodded slowly. He looked back at Elisa. "So, you were warned this would happen, and you did it anyway." Elisa started to stammer. The risk of not acting was too great. The potential for... The CEO cut her off. "The potential for what? We have never had a harassment complaint about this. Ever. You invented a problem, implemented a solution that crippled the company, and in the process, you hurt the careers of the very women you claim to be protecting." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Elisa was pale. The CEO then looked at me. "Brian, what would it take to fix this?" I had my answer ready. "Abolish the policy. Let me do my job. Let all of us do our jobs." The CEO looked at my VP, who nodded in agreement. Then he looked back at Elisa. His voice was cold and flat. Elisa, your vision of people and culture is incompatible with our company's goal of shipping products and making money. Your services are no longer required. Just like that. It was over. Her jaw dropped. She looked like she'd been slapped. She tried to say something, but the CEO just held up a hand. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. Have a nice day. She was escorted out of the room, completely stunned. The CEO looked at my VP. Draft a company-wide email. The policy is rescinded, effective immediately. State that our company values mentorship and direct collaboration above all else. Then he looked at me. Brian, thank you for your honesty and for your patience. Now, please go fix my project. I walked out of that office feeling 10 pounds lighter. By the time I got back to my desk, the email from the CEO was already in my inbox. It was short, direct, and to the point. No jargon, no fluff. A wave of relief washed over the entire department. I looked over at Ricky's desk. He was just slowly, silently clapping. The first thing I did was send a message to Emma. Hey, conference room 3 is free at 3 p.m. Let's get that component fixed. A moment later, I got a reply. Just a single simple smiley face emoji. We met in the conference room. It was like no time had passed. We spent 2 hours at the whiteboard. By the end, we had a solid plan. The bug was identified, and the path to a fix was clear. She left that meeting looking like her old self again. Energized, confident. Later that day, Ricky stopped by my desk before heading home. He leaned against my cubicle wall. So, he said, the great ideological experiment is over. I just nodded. Back to common sense, I guess. He smirked. It's just funny, isn't it? He said, looking out over the now bustling office. They came in talking about empowering women. But the most empowering thing for Emma was a 40-year-old dude in a conference room explaining how a memory leak works. He shook his head. They created a world so obsessed with imaginary dangers that they broke all the things that actually worked. A true classic. And with that, he walked away. He wasn't wrong.